Thank you for joining us this morning and good morning. Um, Welcome to the Sustainable Growth Coalition's webinar on how to build your business case for circularity and systems change. This webinar will be recorded and will be shared out with all of you and those who couldn't make it today. My name is Christina Vang. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm a project coordinator at Environmental Initiative. We ask that everyone say hello in the chat, wait for with who you are, what organization you're with, what your role is, and your LinkedIn account if you would like, so that we can get to know each other and connect with each other through social media. As people continue to introduce themselves, I'd like to share some of our webinar norms for today. So as I mentioned, we invite you to hover over your name and add or include your organization, your pronouns if you would like, so that we know who you are. And we ask that you keep your audio muted when you are not sharing, and turn your video on so we can see who's in our virtual room with us this morning. And you can also switch to a gallery view to see more video tiles in the top right corner of your video. And as we continue in this virtual world, please feel free to use the chat box function to share your thoughts and to chat one-on-one with new or old friends. For today's webinar, if you do have a question for speakers or for a moderator, please feel free to put that into the chat, and we will be monitoring that and using it for a Q&A. And then if you're having any bandwidth issues, you can stop your video and just use your audio. And then if you're having audio issues, you can use where you can't hear or we can't hear you. You can try using your phone audio and calling in. And lastly, I would like to take a moment to recognize Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota for sponsoring today's webinar. We want to say thank you for supporting our work and supporting this webinar. And then with that, I'm going to turn it to Amy Federico to talk about our focus for today's webinar and welcome our speakers.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Fredrigel, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the Managing Director of the Sustainable Growth Coalition at Environmental Initiative. For those of you who aren't as familiar with us, our mission at Environmental Initiative is to catalyze collaboration across perspectives, power, and systems for social equity and environmental health. As a program area of EI, the Coalition is a corporate sustainability leadership network, fostering cross-sector collaboration to advance a circular economy as a more prosperous alternative to the current linear economy. A circular economy is a thriving system that values and preserves all types of capital. Resources and talents are utilized to their highest potential, and all inputs are used and then reused to continue to serve our needs in a cyclical fashion. We use a systems approach to advance our vision at the societal level. There's a robust business case for circularity, such as reducing costs and risks, meeting customer, investor, and employee demand, advancing innovation for markets, products, and services, improving quality of life and the health and well-being of our communities, attracting and retaining top talent, and growing job opportunities. The Coalition focuses on the energy, materials, and water systems, both individually and at the nexus between those systems, which is primarily what we are talking about today. Our members include Fortune 500 companies whose global headquarters are located in our region, as well as other private and public sector leaders with regional footprints. You can see our list of Coalition members on this slide. We're in our 5th anniversary year, and we're taking time to celebrate many of our accomplishments. In 2020, a few top accomplishments where we used our voice and took action included when member leaders testified at the Capitol last winter about the importance of policy that protects the climate and advances clean energy. Hosting our legislative breakfast last spring, with legislators, commissioners, and business leaders. Hosting public webinars such as this one, as well as in May on circularity leadership and a customer utility collaboration case study we published in July, and launching our new executive network through a C-suite roundtable in mid-December. Today, our webinar objectives are to help you build your own business case for sustainability using the case studies shared by the panelists to uncover business growth opportunities, drive innovation, and promote thriving communities and regions. This systems-based approach will advance the circular economy through collaboration and partnerships. We're excited to announce that we published our new web-based Circularity Toolkit last week, with case studies from speakers today, as well as other information on circularity and systems change. Jillian is dropping a link into the chat box for this new toolkit. The toolkit is a great place to start for your business partners along your value chains who would like to learn about the basics of circularity and why it matters. And the toolkit also contains tips and tools for more experienced circularity thought leaders, including additional case studies, access to more resources, business case talking points, and more. The case studies embody ways to advance the 4 guiding principles that we aligned on last spring, as seen on this slide. They advance economic development and equity inclusion on environmental issues with a systems approach. We want to thank the members of our new Circularity Task Force for helping frame up our cross-cutting work at the nexus of systems, and also want to thank our materials strategy team for developing the foundation for this toolkit. For this webinar, we'll start by hearing from our speakers, then we'll go into a panel discussion, and then we'll create space for all of you to ask questions. Please join our conversation on social media as well by sharing insights or thought-provoking ideas from our speakers. You can use the hashtag SGCoalition. This is posted in the chat box as well. To help our speakers target their remarks based on who is in the audience today, we'd like to learn a little bit more about all of you. So please take a few seconds to respond to these polls. The first one is, what does your organization provide? And the code to the poll is also in the chat box as well. Looks like, oh, still moving around a lot. About a third products, a little more than a third services, about a third both. Okay, kind of an even mix here. And our second poll is, how far along is your organization on implementing circular economy principles? Are you just getting started, here to learn about getting started, or a little bit farther along on your journey? 3.8 showing up right now. And we'll ask a couple polls like this throughout the course of the webinar. So just wanted to give you the heads up about that. Okay, we're settling in and a little more than 3 there. Great, thanks for responding. That helps us know who's here today. Well, now I'd like to welcome our speakers, several coalition member leaders, to talk about how they're taking a systems approach to achieve their company's sustainability goals while advancing broader societal level circularity. First, we're going to hear from Abby Liubaka. She is a senior product stewardship engineer at Tenant Company, where she focuses on reducing the environmental impacts of their products. More about her background will be in the chat box. With that, I'll pass it over to Abby.
Like Amy said, I'm Abby Liubaka, and I'm a senior product stewardship engineer at Tenant Company. First off, I would like to thank Jillian, Audrey, Christina, and the rest of the coalition for all their hard work on this toolkit. I think it will be a great starting point for many companies. And in general, it's been an incredible opportunity for Tenant to collaborate with EI and the other coalition members over the years. So I really thank you all. All right, first slide, please. Okay, so let's be honest, there haven't been too many great things to come out of 2020, but we've got 5th anniversary of the coalition, and then a super exciting one for Tenant is that we are celebrating our sesquicentennial, or our 150th anniversary this year. So we started out as a lumber mill making wood flooring in 1870, And in 1932, we reinvented ourselves by producing our first mechanized floor cleaning machine. And today we are a global leader in our industry with over $1 billion in annual revenue. Next slide, please. So for many years, Tenant has been in the business of selling and leasing new equipment and also offering direct service plans and parts and consumables in order to keep these machines up and running. But in 2014, we realized we were missing out on a lot of revenue that other companies were capturing for us by buying, refurbishing, and reselling our customers' used machines. So we quickly decided to bring this capability in-house, and that is when Recon was born. Next slide, please. So at Tenant, we pride ourselves on our high quality, reliable, and durable products. This means that our machines can last for many, many years if they're taken care of properly. The Recon program enables us to maintain that high quality while extending the useful life of our products, which, by the way, keeping products in use is one of the core pillars of the circular economy. So how does Recon work? We either take back or buy back used equipment from our customers through leasing programs or maybe trade-in programs. And then these machines are cleaned inside and out and refurbished to one of 3 tiers. So certified pre-owned is at the very top, where the machines come out looking like new, and they also come with a longer warranty. In the middle, we have a used tier, where the machines might have some cosmetic blemishes, but otherwise they're in really great working condition, and they come with a little shorter warranty. And then at the bottom, we have an as-is, where we might tidy up the machine and we'll definitely make sure it's in safe working condition, but that's about it. So the tier chosen depends on multiple factors. We've got the current state of the machine. So if it's in really rough shape, likely it wouldn't be worth renewing it to the very top certified pre-owned state. It would simply take far too much labor and far too many parts to get it there. And then the other thing is it depends on the likelihood of this machine being resold. For some models, the demand for used is so high that we simply can't keep them in stock. So as you can see on the screen, the machines often come out looking as good as new, but the big difference is that they can be resold at a much lower price point. And this brings us to our first aha moment that Tenant had. Some employees were initially quite concerned that by offering used products, it would take away sales from our new machines. But quite frankly, the opposite happened. By expanding our offerings and creating this new category of products, we were able to open up to a whole new section of the market that we didn't previously play in. These new customers loved that they can buy some of the highest quality machines at sometimes 50% off. And our sales reps also bought in very quickly because this gave them another lever to pull when a customer's budget didn't match up to a new machine price. So my first tip is to not be afraid that selling used will take away from new sales, because it may have little to no impact, but there may be many other enormous benefits. So one other important thing to note was that we did have to find some dedicated spaces for the Recon work to be done, because the flow and the type of work is not at all the same as building a new machine. So we couldn't do this refurbishing on the assembly lines. So we now have Recon facilities in a few areas of North America, Europe, and Brazil to serve each of these markets. So there was a bit of investment that was needed, and it's definitely something that needs to be considered when looking at refurbishing our product. Next slide, please. So some key learnings. I've just mentioned that by reconditioning machines, a new market segment has opened up for us, which has been great for both Tenant and our customers. But for the customers themselves, it also provides them a hassle-free way to get rid of their old equipment, and then they can use any of the residual value left from it towards a new machine. So it's very similar to a trade-in on a car, let's say. One other very important consideration is that having this program in-house also ensures that tenants' image of high quality is maintained because we are doing the work ourselves and we're not leaving it up to another refurbishing company, say. After all, we design the machines, so I figure we know them best. That brings us to one of my favorite benefits, and that is that our engineers can, and they actually do, visit our recon centers in order to learn how the machines degrade over time, but then they also can gather feedback on how to make them easier to disassemble and easier to refurbish. And then all these ideas they can take back with them and can incorporate them into new designs for new machines. And this should basically save us resources in the future as we service or refurbish those machines more easily. Another valuable benefit that we have realized is that this product category has helped us as a company to get through tough times, which is something that everyone is thinking about these days. Sales of our recon machines have proven to be notably resilient through economic instability. Again, I believe this is because we are able to offer that same high quality product at a much lower price. We all know budgets are tight during these times, so this has simply been a great option for many. And last thing I've noted here on the screen is that Recon is helping us to be a more circular company. Not only are we keeping our products in use, but it has enabled us to discover ways that we can keep more individual components in use as well. Instead of simply taking off the old parts and always installing a new one, we are identifying ways to restore those used parts to a like-new state and keep them on the machine. So this keeps costs down both for tenant and also then for the customer. And it also keeps parts out of the landfill and reduces raw material use upstream. So as you can see, there is quite the snowball effect just by shifting your mindset into reuse and renew. So if you are a product manufacturer, I encourage you to take a really hard look at your products and brainstorm some ways that you can implement the circular economy. There are endless ways that this can be achieved. Keep your eyes open for opportunities and just be willing to try something new. One quote that I heard just last week that I really liked was, "The comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there." I just think that's really true. So if you have an idea for a new way of doing something or have a clear business case and a small group of people who are willing to and maybe even passionate is better about getting it done, your leaders will likely have a hard time saying no to you. So I encourage you to start the conversation. And if you don't manufacture a product, I'm sorry you had to listen to me blabber on for the last 10 minutes. But don't worry, our next two presenters will show you other ways that you can bring circularity into your business. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. I think there's a lot of transferable experience there for anyone, regardless of your business model. The link to Tenant's case study will be shared in the chat. Next, we are going to hear from Dana Slate. He is the Director of Sustainability Programs for Health Partners. He's responsible for managing Health Partners' comprehensive set of sustainability programs. More on his background in the chat box. Now I'll pass it over to Dana.
Thank you, Amy. Can everyone hear me okay?
Sounds
okay,
great.
Cool. Next slide, please. So Health Partners is an integrated nonprofit health system. And what that means in English is that pretty much anything to do with health we do. We have care delivery facilities. We have about 90 clinics and hospitals. We have health insurance. We have about 1.2 members. And overall, we have about 26,000 employees. Next, please. So a lot of people, when they think about sustainability, especially if they don't have any experience in the field, think that sustainability is a drain on the bottom line. And it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And that's what I'm here to dispel that myth that you can really make sustainability sustainable for your organization. And as Abby indicated, it's especially important in these times when budgets are tight and everybody's looking to save as many pennies and dollars as they can. So I am fortunate to work for an organization that really does take sustainability seriously. I have been with the organization since 2011, and we have been able to have a great deal of success. And listed on this slide are some of the reasons why we have been able to have that success. We really have a lot of support from our senior leadership team. I report to our general counsel, and we have regular meetings with our senior leaders to really reinforce where we're going, where we want to do, and how we proceed, and how to avoid any pitfalls that may be in our way. One of the ways that we've done that is, as a nonprofit, we have a mission, vision, and value statement for our organization. And one of the things that we did early on is to make the connection between our mission, vision, and values and our sustainability program. In that way, we have taken our lean and mean department of 2 and really expanded it to 26,000 people. And it's a wonderful thing when you are talking to someone about how our sustainability program is aligned with and supports mission, and you see that light bulb go off over their head. Another really special thing about our program is communication is our BFF. And we've really had a great relationship with our communications department. They've been able to help us tell our story. I just got an email this morning with the final draft of our second annual sustainability report, which I am very excited about. So I will be sharing that out with everybody here in the next little while. Another thing that really makes our program stand out is we have a lot of structure and accountability. So we have many tasks throughout the hierarchy of our program. We have people assigned to those tasks, and we hold them accountable to complete those tasks in an agreed upon time frame. And probably the biggest thing that has given our program success is partnerships. I mentioned the internal partnerships, but we also have excellent partnerships outside the organization, especially on the utility and waste reduction front. Xcel Energy is an excellent partner, and we have been able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars every year as a result of our relationship with them. Same with the counties that we've been able to realize tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants from the counties to help us reduce our waste. We are a member of Minnesota WasteWise and Energy Smart. So if you're not familiar with those organizations, you should check them out because they have lots of consulting and money available to help you with your sustainability programs too. And of course, the Sustainable Growth Coalition and Environmental Initiative are great resources for a program that especially is just starting out. And industry groups. For us, it's Practice Green Health and Healthcare Without Harm. They have been really critical in helping us determine what's material for our organization and help us move the bar, so to speak. Next slide, please. So now I'll get into a few gory details about how and what we have been able to save as a result of our initiatives. And we always talk about energy efficiency first. And really, that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck. So in 2019, we're able to realize over $100,000 in rebates, primarily from Xcel. That translates into over $420,000 in annual savings. And I always like to call that the gift that keeps on giving, because those savings will be there for the life of the equipment. We made a pretty big commitment to solar, in particular the community solar gardens in Xcel's territory. So last year, our commitment to solar produce over 12,000 megawatt hours of solar, which is the equivalent of about 1,000 houses worth of energy for a year. And the great thing about that is we get a rebate every month from XL Energy. So last year we received over $300,000 in addition to the rebates that we got for the projects that we completed. And the really good thing about that is not all of the solar gardens that we have committed to are in production yet. So those numbers are going to continue to go up over the next couple of years. And as a result of transportation being the largest producer of greenhouse gases, we have broadened the scope of our energy efficiency program to really look hard at sustainable transportation investments. We have electric vehicles, and we have electric vehicle charging stations at several of our facilities. Next slide, please. Waste is one of my biggest pet peeves. In healthcare, there is no type of waste that is not generated. And a lot of it is plastic and a lot of it is disposable. And that hasn't gotten better during the pandemic. So with that, it has been really a focal point of our program since we started. Last year, I'm proud to say that we were able to divert over 3,300 tons of material. That saved us money. It saved us over $300,000 for the waste that we diverted or we found a reuse for. And part of that reuse was donations. So we donate to missions throughout the world and also other local nonprofits. And one of the savings aspects of our waste segregation program is that we're able to capitalize on there being tax on trash, but no tax on recyclables or on compost. And just for perspective, the highest tax in the state is in Ramsey County. So the tax on trash is 70%. So for every dollar that you spend an additional 70 cents to throw something away. So there's really cost incentive to move things out of the trash and into the recycling or compost, or don't generate it at all. And probably one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is last year we were able to divert over 220 tons of organic waste from our facilities. Next, please. Conserving resources is a huge part of our program too. Our ORs are the biggest generator of waste. They use the most energy, and they also make the most money for us. So we really focus on our ORs to really minimize our impacts, and to the tune of over $2.3 million just last year. With those efforts, we were able to divert over 470 tons of waste. We're an insurance company too, and one of the big areas that we focus on from day one was reducing the amount of paper that we generated. There's so many options available now with electronic records and electronic transfer of information that you really don't need paper anymore. And if nothing that this pandemic has proved is we don't need nearly as much paper as we've been using the last few years. And we've really focused on water reduction too. It's really not a material concern for us, but we wanted to include it to have a comprehensive program, and we were able to reduce over 8.2 million gallons of water just last year, primarily in landscaping. So not watering places that don't need to be watered, or not watering places that when it's raining. So we've been able to really save a lot of money there. And we've had a huge focus on purchasing local items, especially food. And last year we purchased over almost $2 million worth of local food. Next. So the bottom line is we saved over $830,000 with our energy programs, over $320,000 with our waste minimization programs, $2.3 million with the greening the OR initiatives. And since 2014, we've calculated we've saved over $800,000 just with our paper reduction initiatives. So when people tell you that sustainability doesn't pay, show them this slide, because it sure does. So, and I think that's it.
Great, thank you, Dana. And I just love those metrics and very tangible examples. So thank you so much. A written case study for health partners is currently being developed and will be added to our Circularity Toolkit website once it's ready, to make sure you don't miss any of these new resources as we post them. You can sign up for our newsletter with the link Jillian is dropping into the chat box. And please feel free to start dropping questions into the chat box as well. Bridget's going to monitor those and start collating them for our discussion here in a little bit. Now we're going to hear from our last speaker, Susan Schuster. As a principal community relations consultant at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, she is a persistent advocate for corporate social impact. More on her background is in the chat box. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How are you?
Morning.
I'm so delighted to be here today with you. And thank you to the entire team that worked on this project, Christina and the team, and my fellow panelists. It's really just been a delight. They did a really good job. So if they ever ask you, definitely say yes, because it's been seamless and very easy to engage. I'm really excited to represent Blue Cross today. We are 85 years strong in Minnesota and a healthcare company that covers 1 in 3 Minnesotans with healthcare coverage. So it's a great chance to really share a couple of our case studies today. And the work you see here, I am simply the messenger today, is the result of many of our teams within the company, our policy team, our community relations team, our human resources team, our facilities team, and essentially it really gets down to every single person. I think Dana may have alluded to, our best ambassadors really are each and every one of our employees, and that's how we're going to make the biggest impact and really drive true systemic change. So as you look at the case studies that we've talked about so far, I'm going to shift a little bit and get into talking about using your human and social capital to invest in healthy communities. So as you think about it, we each only have one life to live, and perhaps that is the most poignant finite resource that we have. But within that lifetime, we have incredible ability to renew that resource and to generate energy within ourselves and to really make the most of every life that we have on this earth. So be thinking as I talk about kind of things that you can impact on your end and how you can really leverage your own human and social capital within your companies. Next slide. So let's take a look at how we look at this at Blue Cross. Our social impact strategy really focuses on 3 pillars: community, healthcare, and environment. And essentially, we're working to help ensure that everyone has the greatest and equitable opportunity to live their fullest life possible. So that's where our strategy for social impact really focuses. So let's delve a little bit deeper into that. Next slide. As we look at sustainability and circularity as it relates to our work, we really look at this as a continuum, and from upstream to midstream to downstream. For those of you that are in sustainability or public health, you may be familiar with, the parable of the river. It goes back to even the 1930s with Saul Alinsky, and came into focus in 1975 with a public health statement and case study that looked at, in healthcare, we're spending about 96% of our dollars downstream once people are sick. But if we started really looking at upstream factors, then we would see that we can make the greatest impact by getting to the root causes. So if we look at things like structural racism and racial and health equity and social determinants of health, we can really see how making some changes upstream will really help us downstream. And I'll let you keep focusing through this. Yep, and one more time to really show along this continuum, once you get all the way to the right and you're all the way downstream, the only thing that you can do is focus on the current needs. You can't really impact the ability of us to ensure a healthy life for everyone. So we're continuously working at all of these levels, and we do a lot, of course, downstream, but when we look at really impacting systemic change, we look upstream to other factors. So let's dig a little deeper into social determinants of health and racial and health equity. Next slide. So what are the social determinants of health? You may or may not have heard this terminology, but when you look at the health of a human being, only 20% of our health is really impacted by the healthcare that we receive, the care that you receive in a doctor's office or in the hospital. So 80% of our health is really attributed to other factors, things that we can influence, like healthy behaviors, getting physical exercise, all the way up to like our physical environment. And then a full 40% of our health is really based on these social determinants of health. And these are conditions in which we are born into, we live and work, play, live our lives. And they get down to the basics of, do you have access to healthy food? Do you have a safe and sustainable place for you to live? Do you have equitable access to education and job opportunities? So let's take a little bit further deep dive into how that relates to the case studies that we're going to take a look at today. Next slide. So when we think about social determinants of health, those are really components that feed into equity. Does everyone have a fair and equitable chance to live the healthiest life possible? And as we get into looking at social determinants, you'll see that not everyone does have the same chance. Not everyone has food that they know they can eat every day or has a safe place to live. Next slide. And even more complicated as we get into really looking at the lived experiences of people in our community, race does play an issue. As you know, in Minnesota, we are dealing with some of the greatest disparities in the country. And we know that communities of color are impacted more greatly by some of these inequities. A great example that I like to highlight is that even in my own community, in St. Paul, our Frogtown community, if you're born into that neighborhood and live in that neighborhood, your life expectancy is only 70 years. But if you live a mile away in another related neighborhood, you are likely to live to 83 years of age. So this is a huge inequity if you consider what the differences of those experiences would be. And really, people aren't having the same chance to live a healthy and happy lifestyle. So let's take this a little bit further as we go on. Why does this matter? Next slide. So if you think about equity and racial justice, it isn't just an equity issue per se. It's actually something that has a huge impact on where we put our actions and our words and where we try to make a difference. So as Dana mentioned earlier, he doesn't like waste, right? Well, no one likes waste. And if you really look at how can we remove waste in the healthcare system, you don't need to be able to read this slide because there's just a lot of factors that we can use to get rid of waste in the healthcare system. But one of the biggest ways is actually to work on equity and racial and health equity. If we removed any of those inequities in the system, we would have a huge impact on removing waste in the healthcare system. So that's why it matters, because these equity issues are really a barrier to sustainability and racial and health equity in our community. Next slide. So how can we make a difference? How can we make an impact? If you look at how we can impact health in the community and population health, there are many of these different factors. And depending on which factor we're looking at, you might have different people involved. So for instance, if you were going to be looking at the environment, like Dana was looking at many of those aspects, you'd have my colleague David Miller here, who many of you probably know, talking about some of the work that we do with environment. If you were looking at behavioral health, you would have one of my colleagues, Brendan Shane, here, looking at the work that he's doing on that end. And if you were looking at clinical and overall health sustainability, you might have Amy Bloomquist, our Director of Sustainable Design, here. So we do work across all of these different levers, and really the work that we do as a company is essentially about equity and racial and health equity, but also the work that we do to engage our employees in the community is what we're going to take a look at today. So the social aspect of much of our case studies is really where our focus is right now. And then we have another case study where we have legislative impact. So we're going to focus on social and legislative on our case studies today. Okay, next slide. So as you look at 2020, we're going to start where we often start when we're talking about the year. I think as Abby mentioned, you know, there were a lot of hard things this year, but there's also a lot of really great positive things that have come out in terms of people joining together in coalitions and really making a difference. And COVID-19 is certainly one of those. This case study really focuses on our legislative team and the advocacy and action that you can take to make a difference together. We can't drive systemic change alone. We need to work together in that. And COVID-19 certainly has been a great example of that. So early in the pandemic, when it started in early March, obviously as a company, we all have mobilized to do the best that we can to make a difference here. So from a legislative standpoint, we had our CEO put forth a letter to our legislators that really showcased how we were coming together as a company. We wanted to share with our legislators what we were doing as a company, including, covering all testing and treatment for COVID-19, making telehealth more accessible, and, many, many other things on the list. And then within that, we also said, from the government, this is what we're going to need. We're going to need support on contact tracing. We're going to need these other things we see to make sure that things are as good as they can be in this tough situation. And kind of at the same time we were doing that advocacy, we were also leveraging our employees to step forward and make a difference in the ways that they could make a difference. So we had 140 associates that stepped up to be volunteer contact tracers, and we really leveraged with our healthcare systems to support the healthcare professionals on the front lines that needed masks. So we partnered with Alina, and together with Alina and Blue Cross and the community, over 80,000 masks were generated within just the first few months of the pandemic, really supplying key professionals with the support they needed that didn't have the PPE that they needed. Next slide. So that was April, and we know that things really changed after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and provided yet another time when advocacy was really key. So as we looked at what we could do for the community in response to the unrest and to the recovery that was needed, again, we stepped up, and our CEO, Dr. Craig Samet, put together with our team a list of recommendations to really address the structural racism that we have in our community. He sent that letter on June 12th, and together with many CEOs, we have joined together to really say we can work together on these issues, and we can make a difference if we work together. We didn't single-handedly do any of this. If you want systemic change, you need to work together. On July 20th, HR1, the HR House of Representatives resolution was passed, which stated that racism is a public health crisis. And through that was formed the Select Committee on Racial Justice. And it has been just a great response to see these initial steps happening. And even last month, that's our colleague Vijang Mua testifying in October. Over 50 people testified to what they see about racial and health equity. And there's a committee of 13 people that are working together on this issue. And already many things are happening. At the same time that we were doing advocacy, we were also, again, really leveraging our associates in the community. On the lower right, you can see some of our volunteers working on Lake Street with the YWCA of Minneapolis, and really looked at all the ways across the continuum that we could make a difference. So when there are urgent needs, we're going to work downstream. And if we want to work on policy and systems change, we're working more upstream. Next slide. So as you get into what human resources that you have and other resources that you have. Our next case study really is an example of how to leverage that human capital towards making a difference for healthy communities. We have this community giving garden at Blue Cross, which is our other topic of interest today. And this is our 13th growing season with the Giving Garden. It really started with a great idea from 3 women in our IT department. They were strolling around our walking paths at work and had the idea, we've got this great corporate campus. What could we do with that? Could we grow fresh, healthy vegetables for the community? And from that idea, they leveraged with our human resources department, our facilities department, our community relations department, and really took that idea and made something of it. At the time, the goal was just to provide fresh vegetables for a local domestic violence shelter. Families were living there and didn't have access to a lot of fresh vegetables. At the time in 2008, you might remember food shelves didn't even have refrigerators in 2008. There was almost no fresh food. I mean, the fresh food movement at food shelves really started over the last 10 years or so. So it was a big innovation to have even fresh vegetables at the domestic violence shelter. And then from there, we produced so many vegetables that we were bringing those out to the community through a food shelf. We also work with the Department of Indian Work in St. Paul to work with their diabetes management program. And we started another garden on the Iron Range with our Northern Minnesota associates. So it's just been a really terrific project. I like to say that, a garden isn't rocket science. It's pretty easy to understand a garden. But when you really do a project like this, you have so many unexpected benefits that you haven't really thought of. This project has really woven itself into the fabric of our culture and spurred on other great ideas that are serving the community in other ways. So if you flip to the next slide, I think you can get just a little sense of what I mean by that. I mean, with any good idea that has social impact, you're going to have some expected benefits that you think you're going to get out of that. But also we had so many unexpected benefits of goodwill and relationships and taking the innovation of working in the garden to where else could I be innovative? Where else could I make a difference? We worked with a lot of different partners. As you look at the coalition, the idea that all of us today here are really our own network of networks. So when we join together today, I bring all of my networks to this network, and each of us brings that. So if you think about, even if you're inspired by something today, who knows what that could spur? A great example of that is we took the idea of the Giving Gardens and brought it to the YMCA in Midway and used a teaching giving garden with their early childhood program, which is in a very economically depressed area. That pilot was so popular that they brought teaching giving gardens to all of the YMCAs in the Twin Cities that have an early childhood center. So that idea, really blossomed out from that situation too. So even just in 2020, I added in red some of the networks that we're really working with this year to even amplify the project into a bigger way. So after 13 years, it's still growing. There's still more impact. And in fact, if you're interested, our Spring Garden Summit is on February 3rd. And so all of you are invited to come and learn more about this project. So I think to wrap up, I'd like to just say that the energy of projects like this that really involve people, they need to be win-win-win. So if they're a win for the employee, a win for the company, and a win for the community, that's what keeps things going and keeps that human energy sustainable. And as you look at the social capital that is necessary to achieve this work, it really is the trust, the collaboration, and the networks where nothing is possible without this circularity of human energy. And that's where I see a lot of potential in all of the case studies, because circularity doesn't happen without people. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Those are really powerful metrics regarding inequities and also balancing out. I love all of the kind of ripple effect graphics you have about the power of collaboration. The link to Blue Cross's case study will be shared in the chat. And now for the rest of you, please take a few seconds to submit your answers to our next poll. Who do you need to be engaging with to advance sustainability within your organization? Thinking about working on these types of examples you just heard from the speakers, what comes to mind? So the code is 4176045 for the Menti.com poll. Leadership, operational staff, external partners, executives, employee networks, the DEI team. This is great. Leadership is winning. Supply chain, finance, associate resource groups, community relations, employees. Oh, this is really fun. Looks like leadership is still, the organizational leadership is still winning. Lots of great ideas here. And we are going to be launching our executive network in December. If you have a member of your C-suite that you think we should invite to a roundtable on December 15th, please reach out to me and we can talk about that, especially since leadership is rising to the top here. It looks like that is something that you all are very interested in. Well, thank you so much. We do a lot of analysis of these Menti polls, these wordles afterwards, because there's a lot of great information we can glean. So now we are going to use the rest of our time for a panel discussion and then Q&A. This is another opportunity for you to start submitting any questions you have in the chat box. And as you do that, I'd like to ask the panel a few questions. So let's start with, what advice would you give to companies or organizations in other sectors thinking about transferability, other leaders and sustainability professionals that are trying to approach something like you did? So advice across sectors is the question. So who'd like to start?
I can kick off with this. You know, the art to listening to a presentation like we have today is to not get depressed, especially if you're just starting out with your program. You know, the three organizations and most of the organizations in the Sustainable Growth Coalition have mature, well-established sustainability programs, and we've all been at it for many years. I can speak for us and probably most of the other organizations is we didn't start here. And so, you know, whenever I get asked this question, I think back to the old Nike ad, and I say, just do it. Just jump in, do something, and use the momentum of the success that you're going to have to build upon, and kind of survey the environment within your organization too, because I can almost guarantee that you're not starting from scratch. There's something going on within your organization that you can build on. And our facilities folks have become some of my best friends because they only got noticed before when something went wrong. And so now when we're really shining the light on all of the money that they're saving the organization with our upgrades, they like me a lot. So it's a good thing.
I could jump in and just add that really be open to innovation as you look at this, working across different parts of your company and taking an idea that sounds a little crazy at first. I know our giving garden at first, people thought, oh, this is crazy because they've never seen anyone else do it. But that's what innovation is. It feels a little bit unusual at first. So really be open to ideas and working within and outside your company with anyone that would be a good partner.
Awesome. So from a product perspective, I guess my advice would be to study how your customers actually use your products and determine what happens to them after the customer is finished with the product. If you find evidence of a second use, then simply start having the conversations internally to see if reconditioning is viable. One important aspect is that you'll need to have a clear method to then take your products back from the customer. If you can't easily get them back, then you're missing the most important part of this process. So some of the easiest ways for take back are through leasing or rental programs, or like that product as a service. As someone in Recon once told me, there is no better lead for a sales rep than an expiring term lease, which is super true. And then one last tip to consider is to not refurbish everything to like new. A lot of customers don't mind cosmetic imperfections as long as the product works as intended and they can secure a good deal on it. So find out what they're willing to sacrifice in order to buy your product at a lower price.
Great points. Thanks, everyone. Let's dig a little deeper on equity. We've heard a few things already, but I would love to hear any additional ideas on ways that your actions are moving us towards a more equitable society.
I can maybe jump on that one just to kick us off. You'll find that when you work on these projects, you have experiences that you didn't even necessarily intend. So just as an example, when we started working on the Giving Garden, what we found was we listened to the community and heard from the food shelves that we were serving that they had particular needs for certain vegetables for different cultural groups. And so when we came back to the company to take a look at how to do this, we really found that we had the resources right there within our company, people that understood these different vegetables and were able to say yes. And I have recipes, and we can share those with the domestic violence shelter and the families, and we can help teach them how to cook with some of these. So we not only had cultural learning within the company, but we had greater interaction externally. So you just learn a lot when you're doing any particular project, and it's resources and knowledge that was always available to you, but you hadn't uncovered it yet.
I can hop in. So I think it goes back to being able to offer high quality at a lower price and basically making our products more affordable for more people. So this means that organizations with lower budgets can spend their money more wisely. So for example, take a school in a low income or disadvantaged neighborhood. They may simply have a smaller budget than other schools around them, which may tend to push them towards lower entry price products, and which in turn, this may require more maintenance over time, and maybe the products won't last as long. Alternatively, they could choose a refurbished product with proven less maintenance. So this will free up some of these vital resources that can then be used for more value-added work instead of continually trying to keep their products up and running. Also, I think that having a program like this in your company really opens up new jobs, and these jobs don't necessarily need degrees. And the employees can also learn some really valuable mechanical or electrical skills, which then could potentially help further their careers.
I could go deep on this one, but I think what I'd like to say is that a lot of our sustainability initiatives have secondary equity benefits. So for instance, decreasing the amount of waste that we're generating it decreases the amount of truck traffic that we have coming to our facilities to pick up the waste. Committing to renewable energy decreases the air pollution in our airshed. And that affects everybody, including those that are in disadvantaged areas. Focusing on, smart transportation within the region really helps impact the communities that are impacted by adverse air incidents in the state. And you know, from a programmatic standpoint, Health Partners has really been focused on food insecurity. So building off from what Susan said, we are a partner in a food shelf called Super Shelf, where they are really focusing on, you know, healthy food that people want and not processed foods that are not good for people's health. And so that I'm really proud of things like that. At Regions, we're donating a lot of our excess food to the food banks in the east side of the cities. And so there's, you know, many things like that we're working on across the organization. And I think, you know, I think all of these things that we're talking about now, you know, racism, equity, sustainability, climate change, all of those things are connected, and we need to look at them at the same time. And that is what systems change is all about. It's changing the systems that have gotten us here in the first place. Going back to the way it was before the pandemic isn't going to work.
Sounds like words of one of the founders of our coalition. Thanks, Dana. Thanks, and thanks for all those thoughtful remarks to all the panelists. This is a question that I think is kind of fun. What surprised you as your project or initiative was proceeding? What are some things that you didn't think would have happened that did, or any other surprising aspects of your project?
Sure, I can hop in. So there was definitely big internal fear in our organization that these recon offerings would cannibalize new product sales. But over time, we're recognizing that this simply isn't true. So I think the biggest surprise was just how many of these customers who started buying recon were truly new to Tenant. The majority had been using some other brand before this. So I think this proves that we were definitely able to enter a new part of the market. One other thing I'll mention real quick is that we completed a life cycle assessment that compared a new machine to a recon machine. And something that surprised us here is how much water is used during the reconditioning process as compared to just like building a new machine on an assembly line. And I guess that makes sense if you think about it, because the first thing they do is thoroughly clean the machine with a hot pressure washer. But just by doing this assessment, it allowed us to take a broader view of our process and identify ways to reduce our overall impacts.
Go ahead, Dana.
You spoke first. Go ahead, Susan. I'll wrap up.
Sure. I think just realizing the surprising impact that this type of work can have on your culture, that it really does build a lot of energy. When you see one idea be successful, or you participate in something good happening, it not only makes the next idea easier, but it also builds support and collaboration within your company. So I think as I look at this, I'm kind of continually surprised at how this has benefits from a talent development perspective, because people are becoming leaders of things that they care about. It really impacts employee engagement. It really impacts community connection. And so don't underestimate the impact of even one good idea, because we've seen many good ideas come forward, and I feel like it's because we really value the concept of the entrepreneurs within our company, the entrepreneurship that can come from having this culture of good ideas are taken seriously.
And I think what I would add is that the thing that surprised us, and it happens over and over, is that simple ideas may not be so simple as you dive into them. And a good example is I mentioned that we had a paper reduction initiative, you know, right at the start of our sustainability program in 2011. And it became apparent pretty quickly that we needed to define the parameters of that. You know, we're a large organization. We use all kinds of different paper, and it turned out that we had all sorts of different suppliers. And so, we had to figure out, okay, what's in scope and what's out of scope. Do we include 11 by 17 paper? Or are we only looking at 8.5 by 11 paper? Are we going to include, the marketing paper that our sales staff used? So at the end of the day, do we use red paper, or are we just, at the end of the day, we decided to make it simple, and we're only looking at 8.5 by 11 white office paper, but it just getting bigger as we do it. That's what we focused on since 2011.
That's great. Bridget, any questions coming in the chat box that we should hear about? Okay, it looks like not any yet. Well, I'm going to move on to another question as people are thinking about things. We've talked about communities already, but just kind of unpacking this even more. I would love to hear more about how the panelists engaged communities, community members, community leaders, various iterations of communities, and how you would understand them throughout your project. And maybe just as you're analyzing things now after your project has been launched or moved along, what might you do differently in the future to engage community members?
Well,
I'm glad to jump in. Oh, go ahead, Dana. We're fighting for who's going to be the one to step up. You go ahead,
okay.
Please.
So I think at the enterprise level, as a nonprofit healthcare system, we're obligated to do a community health needs assessment every 3 years, and so that's one of the things that we do. Our organization goes out and listens to the community. It scans the community on what their needs are, that we can adapt to provide those services to the communities. And one of the really cool things this last round that we did about 1.5 years ago is that we included some sustainability attributes. So we included climate change, we included air and water quality in our assessment. And they didn't rise to the top, but they were included, and it got them on people's radar screen to look at those sorts of things. And then I think the other thing that we've done is we've become really active with groups like the Sustainable Growth Coalition, Clean Air Minnesota, and both of those groups through EI have had strategic planning sessions over the last couple of years, and we participated in them. And especially Clean Air Minnesota, we've engaged the communities that weren't engaged previously. So the reservations, the disadvantaged communities, and really listening to them. I think that was an eye opener for us, and it kind of set the stage for the tremendous heartache that we experienced this summer with the murder of George Floyd and the social unrest. So this stuff was percolating under the surface for a long time, and it just came to the surface this year. But it's been there, and we've started to address it already. So and we'll only accelerate that addressing of that going forward.
And I would add, we have similar ways that we're listening to community in a formal way with listening groups, that type of thing. But I think we really lean heavily onto strong relationships within our expertise across the community. So if we're working in environmental areas, we have those relationships. If we're working with community needs, we really lean in, and we try to really have dialogue and listen to what you really need. So if we're working with a food shelf in North Minneapolis, we have heard this year that they really needed some warm winter gear. So they're in the business of providing food, but we're also working with them to say we have 100 volunteers that are helping make warm winter essentials so that people can meet some other needs. So you might be surprised at what you hear from the community when you work with them, and just having these ongoing established relationships where they're willing to say, I really need support in this area or that area, can lead you to your next innovative idea to really meet the community needs with their voices leading your way.
Great, thanks, Dina and Susan. Oh, Abby, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just have a quick one. So we were able to take some of our existing service centers and add internal capability of recon to them. So from the outside looking in, the buildings themselves basically look exactly the same. So in these communities, of course, we engaged around compliance and permitting for the build outs, but I'm not really sure how much further it went beyond that. You know, as a B2B, we aren't as outward facing to the public and to communities, which I think is pretty natural. So I think this is a space where we definitely need to spend more time in the future. And so I think just inviting in that conversation is a great place to start. I know that we'll learn a lot more by participating in the Sustainable Growth Coalition, and seems like Dana and Susan are experts on this, so maybe I'll be bending their ears in the future to figure out where we need to go.
Great, thanks, Abby. And you might as well stay unmuted because we have a question for you directly from Zach Laporte.
Okay.
Did you see increased engagement from engineering and design staff from an innovation perspective when you started Recon Project?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, I guess I would say that I had to push them a little bit to think about it more, because it wasn't something that's right in their face, right? It's the buildings are pretty close to the engineering center, but it's something that I suggested while we were doing sustainability strategy sessions and targets, figuring those out. I said, you know what, we really need to take a look at Recon because there's a ton of information there that we could pull, because we'll be able to know what's happening with our machines and kind of how to make them better. So we have definitely a ton of opportunity to do more in that space. And yeah.
Great, thank you. Good learnings there. Bridget has a question she's going to share from a participant.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. So we have a question coming in about, I'm curious how sustainability and circularity is addressed in employee onboarding and or written into job descriptions, for example, for engineers or things like that. Any reactions to that question?
I can answer that for us. With onboarding, we do have some information included in our Welcome Day packet, which is our orientation day. It is highlighted on our website as well, as far as, you know, how Health Partners views sustainability. One of the most rewarding things is, you know, when we're actually working at a central location, is just walking down the hallway and having someone come up to you and say, hey, I understand you're the sustainability leader, and I wanted to let you know I'm a new employee. And one of the reasons I chose Health Partners out of the options I had was because of your sustainability program. And that makes you feel pretty good about your program and your organization. You know, it's really kind of a warm, fuzzy feeling that you get because of what we're doing. So
I could jump in and just simply reiterate that in this day and age, this type of work is not something that you can do. It's something you must do. People are looking for this type of work. We hear similar things from many of our associates as they are onboarded. This is a big part of who we are. Our social impact strategy and our commitment to racial and health equity are really a big space that we put out to the community through our social impact report and really through how we live our values every day. So we hear a lot of the same things that Dana's saying he hears, is that this is why I came to work here. I want to make a difference in the world, and I want to help people live healthier lives. So it is part of our orientation, but I think it goes way back to that, to, you know, all of the things that are out there about who we are.
And one thing I'll add to that is, you know, Amy mentioned that we were one of the founders of the Sustainable Growth Coalition, and that was one of the key attributes that we wanted to build on, is that make this region attractive because of the fact that we have so many sustainability leaders from large companies. And I remember, I vividly recall having conversations about, dispelling the notion that this is the frozen tundra, and that, there's a lot of attributes of the organizations that are here that people should really be aware of that they probably aren't at this point.
Certainly, I hear that from a lot of companies and organizations, institutions, that this is a top talent recruiter and retention asset, which was kind of surprising to me, but now it's sort of bread and butter. I hear that all the time. How about you, Abby?
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat. I also hear new employees saying, this is exactly the reason why I chose Tenant. So that is super wonderful to hear from them. As far as onboarding, we do include sustainability slides, I guess, in our onboarding. We do have, I think, some brochures also that are sent out when folks are looking to come to Tenant. And of course, we have a sustainability webpage on our website that we send people to. So yeah, definitely.
Great. All right, the next question is from Luke Horansky. It's also in the chat if anybody wants to follow along. This is building off of some of Dana's comments about air quality. In the current COVID environment, has this initiative been brought to more of a top of mind in different organizations, and what kind of solutions are teams looking into?
So that's a great question, Luke. And I can tell you that this actually directly correlates to the conversations we were having about equity. I was lucky enough to go through climate reality training last year, and one of the slides Al Gore used during his presentation, and I always use in my presentations now, is that it's a slide illustrating the difference between white folks and BIPOC people and people with money and people that pay rent less than $700 a month. And it's striking how different they are. The poor people that are BIPOC are dramatically more impacted by air pollution than those that have money or are white and have the luxury of being able to move. And I know Health Partners as an organization is really looking and working hard to figure out how we correct the racial disparities with not just COVID, because we know that that's happening too, that the BIPOC communities and especially the tribes, not just here, but throughout the country, are being just devastated by COVID. And so, it is something that we're looking hard at and trying to make a more equitable situation. And I know we were looking really hard at that before this next surge, or the surge we're beginning in right now, occurred. And now it's crisis mode and it's all hands on deck. So hopefully when the dust settles a little bit, we'll be able to address that a little more directly.
Great. Well, I'm wondering if anyone wants to look into their sort of crystal ball or what you know of sort of upcoming strategies for your companies, your organizations, and if you could just reflect on how your companies might become even more circular in the future. So what's on the horizon for you?
I can start us out.
Great.
So being a manufacturer of durable goods, the opportunities for us seem fairly endless to me. But just to name a few, we could do a lot in the recyclability space for when our products truly reach the end of their life and make sure that they 100% stay out of landfills. We could also consider the recycled content of the materials that we use to build the machines, so we can reduce raw material extraction. Another thing, I mentioned a business model, but I didn't actually describe it. This is product as a service. So a lot of companies are moving towards this model. So what does it mean? If Tenant hypothetically moved to product as a service, instead of selling the piece of cleaning equipment, we would simply sell a clean floor to the customer. So we would retain the asset, the machine, we would do all of the maintenance necessary to keep it going, and we would just make sure their floor is cleaned. And when I say we, I mean, us or a really close partner, who knows what it would actually look like. But after all, what the customer actually wants is a clean floor, not necessarily to own and operate a piece of equipment.
So I think if we want to get real crystal ball-y about it and really look towards the future, I'm going to say I envision a Minnesota with equity for everyone, where everyone has an equal opportunity at living their healthiest life possible. I really believe that all of the work that is being done in circularity, a circular economy is not possible without people. And people are our most important resource. They are the ideations of all the things that are happening at all of these companies. And if our people are strong and our people feel equitable impact all across our state, I think there's nothing we can't do. So I'm going to say that's my ultimate vision.
And I'll build off from what Susan said. The Sustainable Growth Coalition is 30 so member companies. That's not going to get it done. We need more organizations to step up and to commit to doing the things that are necessary to meet the goals that are necessary to prevent going over 1.5 degrees Celsius and definitely over 2 degrees Celsius. So we need to do more of what we're already doing, but at an accelerated rate. And we need more companies to go along with us, because even with the 30 organizations, that's not enough. I look at my industry. There's not a lot of work going on with others to apply a little peer pressure to our competitors. And I will say that they're open to listening. And we have sustainability groups where it's not a competitive environment, and we do share best practices. And not to say that others are starting from scratch, but we're better, of course.
Great, thanks so much, Dana. I also want to mention we have one more case study that's on our website that we weren't able to touch on today, but it's from Uponor. And if you'd like to take a look at that, it's on the web-based toolkit as well. So check the chat box for that link. As we begin to wrap up, we invite you to participate in our poll to provide feedback so that can help improve our work and influence our work moving forward. How helpful did you find this webinar is the question. And always, please feel free to email us with any feedback for the webinar. As results are coming in, I want to thank Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota for sponsoring this webinar. Thank all of our participants for joining us, and of course, our speakers. The webinar is being recorded, and any links will be shared in a follow-up email to everyone that was registered. And we have several events that we want you to know about. The next Environmental Initiative Policy Forum is on December 11th, and it's on reducing emissions and increasing equity in the transportation sector. Jillian will share a link for registration in the chat box. And I've already mentioned, and you've all underscored the importance of leadership. So we have an event coming up on December 15th for C-suite leadership top executives at organizations and companies that we are co-hosting with Greater MSP. It is a roundtable to discuss the intersection of equity and sustainability. So if you think that's something that you might have your top brass interested in, please let us know and we can talk about that. So with that, thanks again and have a great day.